All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for 22nd of April, 2021. Quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. This commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from Municipal Code of the City of Annapolis, Chapter 21, Section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, districts of historical, cultural, archaeological, and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in Section 21, Chapter 21, Section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed among or between commissioners outside of the public hearing to determine the disposition of the application. Okay. Next on the agenda is the roll call. I'm Tim Leahy. I'm the commissioner, the chairman of the commission. We have Kim Finch. Please say aye.
Aye.
We're here, present. Bobby Collins.
Present.
Our vice chair. Will Scott.
In attendance.
Very good. That's a good one. I don't see Bill Williams yet, but hopefully he'll join soon. We also have staff, Roberta Lanor, our chief of historic preservation.
I'm present.
John Tower, assistant chief.
Present.
And Cheryl Wood, who is our representative from the Office of Law, who supports our commission.
Present.
And our recorder is Ms. Tammy Hook.
Present.
There she is. All right, great. Our agenda tonight, it just consists of 2 pre-applications. And so we will not need to go through some of the other items we normally go through. So we'll roll right into that. First is one church circle traffic signal replacement. So Lisa, Lisa Greco is here from Department of Public Works. If you would introduce your team and then tell us what you'd like us to know, we'll have a discussion and hopefully provide you feedback on the pre-application basis. The pre-application is a accommodation to the applicant. Any comments made by the HPC members at the pre-application meeting are in no way to be interpreted as approval of the projects. Absence of comment or on any aspect of the presentation does not indicate acceptance. So Lisa, I just need you to acknowledge that that you understand that condition of this pre-application.
I understand.
Thank you. All right, over to you.
Okay. Good evening. As Tim said, my name is Lisa Greco, and I'm an engineer with the City of Annapolis Department of Public Works, and I'm the project manager for the Church Circle Traffic Signal Replacement Project. I have with us tonight 3 traffic consultants, and I guess they can introduce themselves. Are they on?
Yeah. Hey, Lisa. Since my name's first on your PowerPoint, I'll introduce myself. I'm Keith Freniker.
Hey, Lisa, thank you. I'm Scott Mason.
And I'm Woody Hood.
Okay.
And they're all with Mead and Hunt. They're the traffic consultants for this project. So this evening, we'd like to present to you a little bit of background. We're going to cover the existing conditions on Church Circle, the project scope, some considerations that we've taken into account. And then we're going to look at each of the intersections, both in plan view and elevation, to help you visualize the proposed changes. We're going to talk about mitigation efforts that are part of this project. I have some equipment images so that you can see what we're talking about, and then the project schedule and cost. So before I get started, not a lot of people, myself included, know all of the terminology associated with traffic signal infrastructure. So I thought I'd just do a real quick give you some images and some names to go along with the photos. So starting in the upper left corner is a image of a traffic signal pole that's currently on Church Circle. It has a breakaway base, and the silver wrap around the base is a rodent barrier. We also have on Church Circle in the center of the screen a T-base, and this is the type of base that we're proposing to use for all of the signal poles on Church Circle in our project. On the right-hand side is the controller. This is the brains of all of the signals. It contains all of the wiring and the controls that control the operations. On the right-hand side, you have an electric meter. And on the left is an appendage that's a battery backup. And then on the lower left is what is called a detectable or tactile warning pad. You're probably familiar, bright yellow. And that's a photo of right on Church Circle at West Street. We're also going to talk tonight. On the right-hand side is a combination pole. So at the top are the traffic signal heads. Mounted part of the traffic signal is the visor, and then you have the lens, which is the colored light that you see. It's a 12-inch LED light. On the right-hand side, you have a pedestrian signal head that's mounted on the pole with the traffic signal heads. But on the left-hand side, you have an individual pedestrian signal head. We'll have some of those on Church Circle as well. And then in the center is a pedestrian signal push button and the associated sign. And I did want to point out in the photo on the right, the traffic signal head is all black. The housing is all black. That is what we're proposing for this project. We have other images. You'll see the existing conditions out there. There's a variety of things. So we'll look at that. But the black signal head that you see there is in Ellicott City in their historic district, and that's what we're proposing for this project. So a little bit of background. This past summer, we had a capital project that was a citywide traffic signal assessment. We haven't looked at our signal equipment in years, decades. We have 52 signalized intersections within the city. However, of the 52, only 24 of them are owned by the city and maintained by the city. As part of this citywide assessment, there was a structural and operational evaluation that was completed, and that assessment was performed by Mead and Hunt. They went to each of the intersections, looked at all of the equipment, they evaluated it and prioritized it and made recommendations as to what intersections needed total upgrades, what just needed some equipment replacement. And from that assessment, Church Circle was identified as the highest priority. And so we moved right into this, the design of this project, the Church Circle Traffic Signal Replacement Project. So they determined that all of the equipment is well beyond the useful life. All of the signal poles and equipment is 35 years old. 10 of the 18 poles around the circle are in poor condition, and 7 of those 10 had severe deterioration as determined by a structural engineer. And so it was recommended that the entire circle infrastructure be immediately replaced. These are some of the photos of the poles that are out there currently. I believe Mead Hunt was going to talk a little bit about what you're seeing here.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So as part of that previous capital project, we were the ones that went and did the condition inspection, and we also had a structural engineer look at a couple of these poles. The people here that are online were traffic engineers, not structural engineers. And you can see the holes in the poles, and that's what structural engineer calls section loss. And the structural engineer said that the section loss was great enough that they should be replaced within 1 year. The other thing that we found out when we were opening the hand boxes, and the hand boxes where the wires go underground into conduit, is that there's no pull or give or take in the wires, and that indicates that the conduit is most likely crushed or collapsed. And that's difficult for maintenance. So for instance, if you have a knockdown or you need to relocate a pole, which could happen because of a knockdown, that it's really difficult to pull new cable from that control box that's over at West Street to one of these poles here as well. So
to talk a little bit about the scope of this project, Church Circle is comprised of 4 separate intersections, but they're coordinated. And the 4 intersections are Church Circle with Northwest Street, Church at West Street, Church in Duke of Gloucester, and Church at Main Street. And as Keith mentioned, it was recommended that we reconstruct the entire circle within 1 year due to the severe deterioration of the poles. The scope of work for this project includes replacing the controller, all of the signal poles, traffic and pedestrian signal heads, the hand boxes which are in the ground, as well as the wiring, and some pavement markings. All of the existing crosswalks will remain as they currently are. Some of the crosswalks are in granite and pavers, such as at the top of Main Street and West Street, but those that are done in thermoplastic on Church Circle and across Northwest Street, those would be replaced as part of this project. We're going to upgrade the handicap ramps to meet current ADA standards. And we're also going to provide ADA and MUTCD compliant infrastructure for visual and physical disabilities. For example, the detectable warning surfaces that we saw early on, and audible pedestrian signals. And this is just an overview. I know you're all familiar with Church Circle, but you can see it's 4 separate intersections, but they're all coordinated together out of that control box. So in doing the design, there's a lot of considerations. First of all, we have traffic engineering standards that I had mentioned. Those are in the manual on uniform traffic control devices. That dictates everything from the location of the poles, the size of the lenses, the colors of the signs, the tactile warning pads. Everything is specified. All the engineering standards are specified in the manual of uniform traffic control devices. We also have to meet federal ADA accessibility regulations. We've had several internal meetings with members of planning and zoning who review ADA requirements. We've met with Roberta as well, and our chief code enforcement officer. And then lastly, we're here tonight because we recognize that we have to meet the historic preservation guidelines because we're in the historic district. So this project is a real balancing act of satisfying the design standards, the ADA accessibility requirements, as well as the historic preservation guidelines. And to try to meet that, those competing requirements, or to try to help balance that, we've taken a complete streets approach to things. We're coordinating with other projects that are currently in the area. We became aware that there was a BG&E gas replacement project coming up that was due to start immediately. We had a water project that was on the books, but we moved it up so that that could follow the gas project. And then the Church Circle project, the signal replacement project, will follow that. And when all these projects are completed, a Church Circle would be repaved. Another consideration to mitigate some impacts during construction is the sequencing. Typically, the contractor may have come in and maybe done all the foundation work first, and then done his hand boxes, and then all the poles. But likely we will sequence the construction such that we'll complete an one intersection at a time, and work our way around Church Circle so as to maintain pedestrian accessibility and accessibility for the vehicular traffic. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our traffic consultants. They're going to step you through each of the intersections. We have plan views such as this, but we also have some elevations so you can get a clear understanding of the impacts to the views.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So I'll just give you an overview of a couple things, and then Scott Mason, who's also on the line, he's going to go through the plan and the elevation details in specific. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that when you saw Lisa's slides, when you looked at the signal poles, there's a couple different options. And the option that we're proposing is called a T-base. It's a little bit higher elevation. And the reason we're proposing that is because one of the reasons for the deterioration and the section loss in the poles is, believe it or not, from dog urine. So there's people that are walking their pets around Church Circle, and there's not a lot of grass, I suppose, and so they're urinating on the poles. And dog urine is very acidic, and it's causing some of that deterioration you see. I would suggest if you're out there, don't push on the poles. They're in pretty bad shape. And so one of the reasons we're proposing the T-base is to elevate that base plate up a little bit higher, so that there's not as much dog urine that gets on the pole. Now, Lisa's mentioned the poles are pretty old, and the newer standards of galvanizing are a lot better. So even when dogs do urinate on them, we should get more than 30 years out of these poles. But this is just another added measure just to give you a little bit more sustainability in terms of the design. So, and then I wanted to touch on two other main points, and then Scott, I'll turn it over to you. And that's about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And a lot of the ADA has been incorporated into a manual that traffic engineers use, and it's called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And perhaps you've heard about it, but the idea behind the MUTCD is that you don't have a bunch of yellow triangle stop signs and then red stop signs. You know, it's got to be uniform. That's the key word. And believe it or not, it was a problem in America a long time ago. And since I'm talking to the Historic Preservation Commission, you probably are aware of those problems that we had in transportation when we had lack of uniformity. And so the one thing the MUTCD tells us to do is to provide for persons with physical and visual disabilities in our traffic signal design. And there's a couple different ways that we do that. One of them is through those detectable warning surfaces that Lisa mentioned and showed you that are on the pavement. That helps people, particularly with visual impairments, with their cane and with their feet to feel where the edge of the surface is. The other thing is you'll notice, there's a slide a little bit later, that we separate some of the push buttons. So that way there's no confusion over which crosswalk it is. And then we also design with a person that's in a wheelchair in mind. So we want to make sure that the push button is accessible. That means a person that's seated in a wheelchair with a typical reach can access that button. And then the last thing we do is we provide some audible cues so that they know which crosswalk that they are crossing. So with that, I think, Scott, you want to go over the plan overview?
Sure. Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. We're all familiar with Northwest Street at Church Circle. And in our design, we also assumed no change in operations of vehicles or pedestrians. This will remain to be busy and very popular for both. There are two crosswalks. We can see at the end of each crosswalk, you'll find a ADA compliant ramp or accessible area. That area is not every ramp is going to be the same here. We basically are going to have two different options. This is a good intersection to start because I can explain both options. If I start at the top, this is a parallel ramp where the sidewalk is depressed such as it is flat adjacent to the push button. That is part of our compliance. And as it ramps up to the existing height, that is at a 12-to-1 slope. We can see that at the top. Now, on the left, on the west side of the intersection, we have the same design there, another parallel ramp where we we had concerns. We saw the damage of these were two poles that had been struck by vehicles when we were asked at the beginning of this to pull those back. So we pulled those back a little bit. You can see the 12-to-1 ramps to accommodate the 5x5 level landing area. As Lisa said at the beginning, the 5x5 comes from the area needed for a wheelchair to turn around, or a wheelchair with someone pushing them to comfortably stand and navigate the corner.
Hey, Scott, if I could interrupt, so we can understand what we're looking at here. We're not all engineers.
Yep, sure.
If I'm reading this, the gray is existing and the black is proposed. Is that what I'm trying to interpret that?
Yes, you're right, Tim. Thank you. That's a good
Okay.
that's a good point. I was
I know you haven't
talking
gotten to the
ramps, and
traffic
I'm
signal.
sure you guys were consuming the entire drawing. Yeah,
Yes.
you can see the 3 ramps. They're completely rebuilt.
All right. But
And
you started
all the
mentioning
traffic-
pulling. You started mentioning pulling the signals back, and that's what I said.
Yeah,
What?
and
Okay.
that was part of that, is to accommodate the ADA compliance of not only the 5x5 level landing area, but also the compliance for the push button with the pedestrian signal indication. And as well, we try to combine, in an effort to combine traffic signal heads, pedestrian signal heads, and push buttons. We do have a desire to minimize the amount of equipment. I think we're all on board with that idea.
And the little square boxes, are the 6-foot standalone pedestrian. Is that, am I reading this correctly?
No, there are.
So we got
black-
triangles and squares and circles, so you got to help
Yes.
us.
Yeah, the circles are the poles, the triangles are the pedestrian signal heads, and then the elongated triangles are the traffic signal heads. And then you can see the black rectangles are proposed hand boxes to accommodate the conduit and wiring. And the gray rectangles are the existing equipment. All the existing equipment will be removed as we install the new signal. I don't
Would it be easier to
think
move
that
to
there's
the next slide?
anything. Pardon, Lisa?
I was going to say, do you want me to move to the next slide? It
Yeah, I
would
think
be,
we can move to the next slide, because we don't really have any operational change here. We're just very conscious of the width of the sidewalk to accommodate the ADA guidance on the width of the sidewalk and to improve on what we have. Yeah, we can't make the sidewalk any wider when we took great lengths to make sure we did not make it any more narrow either. Yes, next slide.
So, one thing I was just going to add, I've noticed on the inner circle that St. Anne's Church is here, and this is the existing crosswalk. And so this is the existing traffic signal for traffic for the Northwest Street approach. And we're pulling it back to the other side of the existing handicap ramp, which will be rebuilt. And then we're adding the pedestrian signal head on it, as well as a push button. So we've combined all of these into one pole and moved it adjacent to the ramp. So that's an example of what we've been trying to describe here. So here's an elevation of what it would look like from Church Circle. Northwest Street is on your right, and I'll let Scott continue to describe.
Yeah, so we're looking at Northwest Street from Church Circle as we're coming through the intersection. You can see the black proposed poles on the left are actually going to be pushed back against the back of closer to the back of the sidewalk. This is merely a representation for conversational purposes. All the existing poles you can see in the brown and green will be removed. So this is what it might look like. These pavement markings will be refreshed.
Same height. So the height here is not changing.
Correct.
It's
Height is not going to
replacement
change. Pardon?
And- What was the question?
Tim had asked about the height. Yeah,
Yes, the height will be the same. They're 14-foot poles. And one thing that I wanted to point out, for traffic purposes, you always have two signals facing each approach for redundancy in case a signal would go out, then you would always have an indication. So at a minimum, you always have two traffic signals facing each approach. And you'll see at some of the other intersections, there were actually more than two because you are on a circle, but we are proposing to remove a couple of additional extra poles.
That's a good point, Lisa. Yes, we have two signals on the far side here, and then the near side right signal, because we do have a sight distance issue as cars are coming either straight through from near the post office or continuing around the circle from Main Street. We want to make sure that we can give vehicles all the notice we can give for a stop.
And so on the right here, it's a little cut off. I don't see an existing pole there. Is that a net new one or is on the very far right?
There's an existing one there. It's
Okay.
just out of the
Yeah.
picture. And as I pointed out in the plan view, this is the existing pole. We're pulling it
I
over
see
to
that.
the ramp. We're adding the push button with the sign, and this is the pedestrian signal head for someone coming across. That's the pedestrian signal head that you would see coming from the inner circle. So the
This
next-
is Roberta. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
I have a question. When we did a walkabout, there was a replacement pole that was taller than the rest.
we're not
And-
there. Yes.
Okay, you're not using that.
Yes, we are, but we'll discuss that when we get there.
Well,
If
the reason I'm asking now is because you are saying the height of the poles is not changing.
So the height of the poles is not changing. The pole that you're talking about, why don't I just skip ahead quickly to I won't do that. Sorry. The pole that we're proposing is 14 feet. And it was taller because this traffic signal head was mounted on top of the pole. As part of this project, which I was going to discuss later in the presentation, we will be mounting the traffic signals. We'll be banding it to the pole so that the top of the traffic signal head is flush with the top of the pole itself. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
you're welcome. So that I'll let Scott pick up. This is the approach from Northwest Street looking towards St.
Yep,
Anne.
so our operation will be the same. We have the two far side traffic signal heads, and we have the one near side right. That near side right signal pole will also have a pedestrian signal head for pedestrians crossing Northwest. It'll also have the push button station. I think we can go on to possibly the next.
Again, on the
intersection.
left-hand side of this, I guess it cuts off
Yes.
what's going on over there.
Yeah, so on the left, good point, Tim. On the left, there are two poles on that corner. One of them is a 14-foot pole with the traffic signal for the vehicles in the circle. It also has two pedestrian heads, one aimed at the church, one aimed across Northwest Street. And then there's a small 6-foot pole that is 10 feet away from it near the face of curb that merely has a push button station adjacent to the level landing area.
Okay, so that's not clear from your presentation
It's
so
not
far.
shown it's not shown on this, but it's shown here on the top view.
Yeah, I've gone back to the plan view.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
the 14-foot pole that Lisa's pointing at there. With
yeah,
the traffic signal head and both pedestrian heads
yeah.
for both directions of pedestrian traffic.
those are
and
the
then if you-
pedestrian heads, and then the push button.
Yep. And
Mounted
then there's
on the pole.
the other pole to the left, right there. That's a 6-foot pole with a push button station on it.
So that's new.
That is
That's-
new.
Yes.
That's a
And
J, or let's see, that's an M.
There you go. It's an M. So yeah,
Not easy.
that's different. Something that's different in the proposed versus the existing are the push buttons. So when we have two directions of pedestrian travel landing on the same corner, we have to have two different pedestrian push button stations 10 feet apart minimum. So that's what we have here. But we did have the opportunity to combine everything onto one pole with the exception of the one push button station.
On this
Tim?
corner.
Tim, I have a question, if I may.
Yep. Sure.
For the engineers, how much of the placement of all these poles and their bases is determined by government regulation?
Well, most of the
A little
placement-
bit. Honestly, we're generally faced with existing signal pole foundations and existing underground utilities. I would
Okay,
say
so-
that is the greatest factor in the decision making.
Okay, so when you move something, it would be because of regulation.
Well, I mean, it's definitely an iterative design process where we don't want to put a new foundation close to an existing foundation because, of course, the existing pole has to be operational while we're constructing the new.
Yeah.
And so just think about, if you dig a hole next to an existing foundation, that existing pole will fall over, right?
Yeah.
So there's usually some rules of thumb about how close you can dig to an existing foundation. So that limits us with putting any new equipment close to existing foundations. Then, of course, as Scott said, we have to be a certain distance away from different types of utilities. And then we have to consider the MUTCD, that's that Uniform Traffic Control Device Manual that
Yeah.
adopts the ADA guidance. So the push buttons shall be 10 feet apart. They shall be within 5 feet.
Well, that's, if I may, you're helping me understand, but I guess I didn't ask my question clearly. So there's a pragmatic first step. You want to reuse what you've got that is reusable. But when you make a decision to move something like the ADA regulations, you're moving it because of government regulation in every case, or is it a mix?
Yeah, I think your use of the word move is confusing me because we're putting on new, I guess. So.
Well, but you just said you're reusing foundations.
No, we're not.
But he said the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is where my problem is coming from. Let me see if I can rephrase it and tell me if I'm getting closer to being clear. You're going to keep every item. Wait, come on, you're going to keep every item where it is if possible.
No.
I know you're replacing the poles, you're replacing the hardware, you're doing all that, but you're going to
Yeah.
keep each light, you're going to keep each crossing pedestrian signal. You're going to keep them in the same site wherever possible.
No, because as Keith said, during construction, it has to remain operable. So all the existing infrastructure has to stay in place and be operable. So we have to build all new foundations in new locations to put the new poles. We can't
Okay.
reuse any of the foundations
Okay.
because
Yeah.
the existing infrastructure has to remain in place.
Okay, well, thank you, because that does clear up my confusion on that point. Now, my real question is, when you decide where to put the new fixture,
Mhm.
what is the determining factor on where you site it?
That's okay. Now I understand your question. So that actually does go back to the manual on uniform traffic control devices. They have some criteria where the red, yellow, and green indications should be located. And it's pretty obvious if you think about it. They have to be within like 20 degrees of your horizontal sight line. And then they have to be a certain height over the roadway because they can't be too low. Obviously, you won't be able to see them. And then they can't be too high either. And then they have a certain number of indications, as Lisa had mentioned earlier. You have to have 2, and that computer that controls it. So what happens if you have 2 of them that burn out on the same approach, the signal will start to go into flash. And
Okay, so let me ask, this is my real bottom line question at this point. Is your decision about where to place the new features extremely limited in your options?
for urban signal design such as this, in our opinion, we feel that they are quite limited. If you ask us that same question for a job we were doing in the State Highway Administration, which is more of a suburban area,
Yeah.
we would say that we have more options. This is probably similar, in my experience, this is similar to doing something in DC or Baltimore, where it's difficult to find space. It's not the worst one, but it's
Yeah.
not the easiest one.
Okay, thank you. That is what I was trying to get clear in my
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, so every time you make a little change, it has a trickle-down effect and it changes everything else on the plan.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think those are some good questions that bring up some good discussion about being compliant to the MUTCD so that we can control traffic, both vehicular and pedestrian, but we have to stay out of the way of the existing poles. We have to stay out of the way of the gas lines. We also have to make way for pedestrians on the sidewalk. We can't put the pole in the middle of the sidewalk. So we have, we have a lot of limitations here.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you. That helps me think through this process, this review much better. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and every poll has been thought through, and you know, you probably perhaps anticipated that there's a lot to consider both above the ground and below the ground, and constructability and federal regulation. So West Street, this is where our traffic signal controller is. We also have two different directions of pedestrian movements across West Street and also across Church Circle at the north leg there. So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but since you just mentioned it, I'll in line here. There's one controller for the whole circle. That's E here on the drawing.
E is the existing controller.
Where
Yeah,
the cross
well,
is.
E is the electric line
I got
coming
it,
in. But yeah, the gray rectangle is the existing controller.
And the black
Our
is the new one.
proposed controller, yeah, will be,
Right next to it.
Same size.
I think, really close to the same. I don't think anybody would recognize the difference, but I believe it's really
The other
close
one's
to the
the other
same.
one's the BG&E box, which is really big.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, this is like, I think it's 22 by 44.
Okay.
I don't
So-
recall the height of it. Maybe it's, I don't know, 40,
Okay.
45 inches tall too.
Great. Thanks.
It's similar, and this controller, this cabinet contains the equipment that controls all four of these signalized intersections. So all the conduits and cables are coming back to this box, and that's where it's energized. The operations here are the same with traffic and pedestrians. We have a parallel ramp design at the top corner near that's a real estate office there. That's a very skinny sidewalk coming around the circle. So we did the best that we could to improve that by installing, we had to have a push button over there for reasons already explained, right? There has to be a push button there that's separated from the other push button. So there's a 12-to-1 slope that you can see those lines as it drops down to a level landing area to receive the pedestrians coming from the church. And then there's a pole on the back of the sidewalk adjacent to the building with pedestrian signal indications for both directions of traffic, as well as the push button for pedestrians wanting to cross West Street. And that is a level landing area there. You see the existing pole there, that'll all be removed. So we feel that that'll be a lot cleaner and wide open as pedestrians that are not crossing, they're just passing through. We'll have a bit more space. And that pole, I think, was in the way of some of the movements. I know I've personally watched people walking in the street to get around the corner. In the circle, as West Street traffic approaches the circle to turn right, there are 3 poles. We are proposing 2 poles because we are combining equipment at the top. The leftmost traffic signal head is combined with a pedestrian signal head and a push button station with that perpendicular ramp design. That ramp has plenty of room to come up 5 feet and still have 36 inches behind it for passing pedestrians, which is the minimum, but I feel that it works here, and we feel that it works there. It certainly meets the standard. You can see the second pole and vehicular indication. So that will appear the same, 2 far side vehicular indications and 1 near side, which is down near the cabinet. Yeah, that pole is also a joint use. We'll have 2 different directions of vehicular signals, a pedestrian signal and a push button station. We can look at the traffic that's coming around the circle. We have eliminated the near side right. We felt that because of the geometrics of the circle and the lack of trees that are on that side of the circle, we did not need the near side right. We have also moved the far side right signal. It's near the controller. That pole is moved by about 6 feet. That is because of a gas line that goes right through where we wanted to put it. But it actually, well, we thought it was a headache at first. It actually solved another problem. It's a better vantage point for traffic coming around the circle to continue in the circle.
Mm-hmm. Can I make it just a real general positive comment about, because we're going to go through each one of these, and I don't want to make the comment. It would be very helpful on this drawing if you list the existing fixtures. Even you might even want to use it's basically your JKLs and M's on your existing versus proposed. Because in this particular case, I think you're going from my point of view, going in the right direction. You're going fewer.
Yep.
And so I think just right on this drawing, it really would help us understand the change, because there's a lot of shapes on here, and it would just cut to the chase for your final proposal to just write that on this drawing for us, and then do that on each of them.
Okay.
I don't think that would take much time.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we are removing all the signal equipment, and we are replacing and combining as best we can while staying out of the way of all the existing conflicts here.
I'm speaking, I hope, for the rest of my commissioners.
Sure.
There's a lot of shapes and drawings and not a lot of description here for us. It requires you to talk it through, and we're listening, but just having a table existing versus proposed is really helpful.
Okay.
Tim?
Yeah, well,
I would actually go further. I would say that it would be helpful to me to simply see where you want to put the new equipment. I know where the old equipment is. And
well, you can see it on here. It's in black.
Oh no, I'm not saying this is the greatest drawing. I'm going a step further than what you're saying.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't feel like I need to know where the existing equipment is. I need to know where you want to put the new equipment. And I would, going back to my previous question, if you can tell us the main reason for that choice, can't impinge on existing gas line, something like that. That's what I need to know.
Yeah. Sure. Notes.
So I think I just would like to kind of summarize in this particular intersection. So on the inner circle, we have 3 existing poles. These are 2 14-foot poles with your traffic signal heads facing West Street. And this is a standalone, just a pedestrian signal for the crosswalk. What we've done is this signal is just being replaced, and we're pulling it away from the travel lane. And this signal is being removed, or relocated, I should say, over here. So this is a 14-foot pole, but we've also mounted a pedestrian signal as well as the new push button on it. The ramp here is a perpendicular ramp. It's same style as currently exists. I think it's very hard to show in any view, plan or elevation, is the change to the handicap ramps on this side of the street. Currently, they're just like the inner circle. They're perpendicular, but they're not large enough. They don't meet the current ADA standards. They need to be 5 foot wide. And so the best way to address that, since you have 2 closely located crosswalks, is to have the handicap ramp in line with the sidewalk. So what this represents is, if you're walking along the sidewalk, the whole sidewalk is going to slope down gently, and all of this area is depressed at street level. So someone in a wheelchair then can go across, and you've got your tactile warning pads here. And then the whole sidewalk slopes back up again. So that's, this side is different than this handicap ramp and this one, which are as they are currently exist. And so, and then over here, the new pole is replacing this pole. We've just pulled it aside, again, avoiding utilities. I believe there's a water valve here. And as Scott had mentioned, we're pulling this pole back, and actually it worked out better. So you've got your two indications facing Church Circle traffic, and you have a near side indication facing the West Street traffic as well. And so we've eliminated, this is an existing traffic 14-foot pole that was facing traffic on Church Circle. We've eliminated that, but we've had to install two 6-foot poles that will only have the push buttons and associated signs to address the physically disabled person. Does that help a little bit better to explain? Anyway.
Thank you.
All I'm saying, yes, but I think a table or a notes on there with,
Okay.
with maybe literally, trying to lead to the horse to water here.
We had the list on and we removed it because we thought it was too cluttered looking. So,
well, we like lists, we like notes. I mean, I do. But you've got 4 different items, J, K, L, and M. If you put them down the left-hand side of a table, and you had a column heading that said existing, and you had a column heading that said new.
okay.
You could do the math, and
We will definitely take that into consideration.
I think I speak for the rest of the commission to say there just aren't enough notes for us to understand this.
Okay.
And there's lots of shapes. It's a very fascinating puzzle. The less you can make us, okay, I've said enough. Go ahead.
So here it is in elevation again, as we noted, we're eliminating this traffic signal pole. It moves over here and we combine it with this existing pedestrian pole and our push buttons. And this pole on the left side is eliminated. And we have a pedestrian pole with pedestrian heads facing across West and across Church Circle. They'll have the push button on this pole, and then there's just a short pole, just the push button to get across Church Circle.
Okay. Whoa.
Oh,
My brain hurts.
I know. And there's a north arrow in the middle of it all. I'm so sorry.
I can understand the north arrow.
Okay. If you want to just start and go around real quick, Scott, just point out
Sure.
the changes here.
So we, on Church Circle, as we are approaching the choice where the road splits, the vehicles have the option to continue on Church Circle or to turn right on Duke of Gloucester as current. So the near side right is necessary. That signal has a red, yellow, green arrow display as it does today. We pulled that signal forward. We needed to stay clear of the existing equipment. We also needed to steer clear of the brick columns of the building there on the corner. The existing pedestrian signal head on that pole really wasn't appropriately placed. And as we moved that pole further, it required us to add a 10-foot pole on the back of the proposed ramp with a push button station for pedestrians crossing Duke of Gloucester Street. On the far side of the crosswalk, where Lisa is pointing, we replaced that existing signal pole in kind. The difference is it's adjacent to a new pedestrian ramp with a push button station.
And just to clarify these shapes, the little black box there over there, that's a hand box. It's flush, that one. That's flush to the pavement.
Yes.
All right.
And the again, the
Again,
triangles are
really
pedestrian
I'm
heads.
sorry. Ended up with a north arrow in the middle here. Not a lot of changes here. It's all the same pole and signals that are currently out there. Correct, Scott? Same signal
Yes.
head, same pedestrian signals.
Yeah, there's one there in the middle, the push button station to cross Main Street from the center island. That is in addition to what's existing. So there are
here.
at this intersection, we have to have a push button at the end of every crosswalk. So we have 6 of them, 6 push button stations. And these push button stations have to be adjacent to the pedestrian ramp. They also have to be clear of each other for reasons to not confuse the public that really depend on these devices.
And these are the 6 foot tall item M.
Yeah, there are 2 M's on this. Yeah, those are the
Are
6
they-
foot.
Are they the little circles with the bubble on them?
Yes.
That's,
That's exactly right. So that is merely a 6 foot pole with a push button station.
and those are net new.
Those are new. On the far side, as a driver is approaching,
And they
This
can't be
intersection-
ganged over. Well, okay.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, how close does it have to be to the ramp? For instance, why couldn't that one that Lisa was just pointing to be attached to a pole, which is just a little bit over there to the left? Why couldn't that one be attached to that pole there as an example of trying to gang these things together?
Well, the guidance that we follow is 18 inches is the guidance that we follow.
18 inches from what to what?
The level landing area where a pedestrian is waiting to where the push button is. So that's why these push buttons are placed. They're all placed at the level landing area.
At the top of the handicap ramp.
One or the other, either at the bottom or the top. They have to be no more than 7 feet from the front edge of the detectable warning surface. They also must be adjacent to the level landing area. So they can't be on the slope, but yet they can't be 14 feet away. And that is the trouble there. There are 3 pedestrian movements coming out of that island. So all 3 push buttons have to be adjacent to the ramp, but at the level landing area. But these same poles are being utilized for traffic signal heads and pedestrian signal heads. There's also a large utility vault right in the middle of all of that. There's other utilities, but the electrical vault is the big one.
So perhaps that's why you couldn't move that traffic pole over to the right and put that push button. You see where I'm going here. Generally, we let the applicant finish their whole application. I get that, but there's just so much detail. I hope you understand. We don't mind if
I understand, and I sympathize. I look at this stuff all day long, and I know you don't. So
Tim,
yeah. Well,
Tim, I understand where you're going to try and get greater clarity, but I'm just wondering if the engineers are so restricted by all of these federal laws and regulations, what is it that we really are tasked with doing here other than protecting, street clutter, and they're working towards that from their own end, and, whether they're going to destroy the view sheds, which they basically seem to be improving. So I'm not sure what you're driving at other than the real lack of clarity in some of these drawings.
okay. Well, maybe I'll stop then. I understand what you're saying, Will. I am driving at something, but I'll bring it up when we're done then.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Great.
So the additional poles that, the few additional poles that are part of this project are always related to the short additional push button poles as required adjacent to the handicap ramp. So I think we have two of those, Scott, or 3 total, 3 short poles, but we've been able to combine other poles. And
That's right.
at this particular intersection, we're removing this pole altogether in front of the old bank building that's currently being renovated. As you come around Church Circle, we notice that you have 2 indications here. I apologize for the north arrow in the middle there. And then you have 2 on the far side. So you had 4 signals that were all for traffic coming around the circle. And we noticed that we could
When it
eliminate.
needs to mute.
Thank you. So we saw these are fairly close together, these poles. It's a very tight sidewalk. And so we are eliminating one of the tall 14-foot traffic signal poles at this location. Otherwise, we're just replacing in kind as adjacent to them with traffic signal heads and pedestrian heads, and the addition of one pedestrian, the short pole here, because you need one. Oh, you don't need one on that side. I'm sorry about that. Oh, we'll look into that. We're trying to consolidate as many things as possible. We're certainly.
That's my point. Have you done enough? That's my point. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. We have 3 crosswalks. That means we have 6 push button stations, and all 3 crosswalks come into the center island.
Yeah, it's already a mess. Okay, go ahead.
It's busy, and part of what we're doing is we want to flatten that out a little bit, because it is some of those pedestrian ramps they're too long, they're too narrow. So we want to improve the view shed. We want to improve the accessibility, but yeah, we are constrained by ADA requirements as interpreted, for pedestrian movements for both the surface and for the indications, both the push buttons, and that includes the braille sign. This is the view that
From Church
see
Circle.
the existing. Yeah, we're coming around Church Circle, approaching Duke of Gloucester and Main Street. You can see on the right, we're removing that existing pole adjacent to the brick pillar. We're replacing it with a 14-foot traffic pole with a traffic signal head to help give advance warning to traffic in the circle approaching this decision point. The other traffic signals that you see on the front side are the same. You have 2 indications for the circle and 3 indications for Duke of Gloucester. The third one is the
This one.
near side. And then the Church Circle traffic has a far side. That's a regulation that says, that Keith mentioned at the beginning, when a vehicle is at the stop bar, we need one signal that's within, more than 40 feet beyond the driver's view, within 20 degrees horizontally on each side. So we eliminated one pole that you can see. You have to squint and look just to the right of that backhoe that's parked in the circle.
Right there.
That pole is going to be eliminated and not replaced.
Okay.
We can go to the next slide. Okay, we're coming up Main Street. Approaching the circle where the crosswalk will remain. We will have a 6-foot pole with a push button on either end of that crosswalk to cross Main Street.
Here.
The other poles on either side of them, the one pole on the right where Lisa's pointer is that pole has 3 traffic signal heads on it. One for Main Street, one for Church Circle, and one for Duke of Gloucester. It also has 2 pedestrian signal heads to serve the pedestrian traffic crossing Main and crossing into the circle, or from the circle back to the brick island. On the left, pardon, the right, don't give up the ship. So behind the don't give up the ship flag, there's an existing pole right behind that light pole. That's going to be removed, and just to the right of it, we're going to install a proposed traffic signal head. That's the far side traffic signal head for Church Circle, continuing through Church Circle. This operation doesn't change at all for vehicles, but it certainly adds all the necessary accommodation for pedestrians.
And one thing I wanted to point out here too is we tried to capture, again, it's hard to show the handicap ramps. So on each side, these are similar to what's currently out there and on the inner circle. But on this side, just like we saw on the corner of West and Church Circle where the real estate office is, you have a narrow sidewalk. And in order to make it work, we're dipping the whole sidewalk down, and then it comes up as it goes around the corner. Correct, Scott?
That's correct, Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah, well explained. That the sidewalk from the front of the curb all the way to the building will be level. About 5 feet wide. It's minimum 5 feet wide. It might be a touch wider because that crosswalk is pretty wide, and this is a very busy pedestrian area. So yeah, we come around that light pole on the near side, and it drops down at a 12-to-1 slope. We offer the level landing area, and then it slopes back up as pedestrian traffic continues around the back of the old bank building.
Quick clarifying question.
Yeah.
The 6-foot poles with the boxes on them, there's a little white square.
That's-
Are those squares to scale? And they're yellow, I believe, not white.
Well, I think that I'm not sure if they're to scale. I think on this was meant for to help us explain what the top view plan might not explain. That's a white sign explaining that this is to push the button to cross Main Street. And then below it is a braille small sign with a black button with a white circle. The example that Lisa showed you at the beginning is the equipment, except for it's not yellow, it's black. And I think that there are some of these in Annapolis now, but I don't recall the name of the intersection.
I think I have it.
Yeah, none of the equipment's going to be yellow, but you're right. The example shown at the beginning of this was yellow.
That's what I recollected.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a white sign with a small black sign that has the braille on it, and then it's a black button with a white outline that glows.
I have an image further in the presentation of it.
Okay,
Thanks.
excellent. And they're all the same. Some are mounted on 14-foot poles, some 10, and some are 6.
So just to summarize, some of the things that we're doing to mitigate the clutter, the additional poles. So again, we're reducing the number of traffic signal poles by either combining traffic and pedestrian signal heads together. We saw that at the head of West Street. And we're also removing 2 redundant traffic signal poles, one in front of the old bank building at the top of Main, as well as the one on the corner in front of the real estate office at West Street. We are proposing the standard black T-base poles that raise the breakaway bases above the level of pet urine. And the black is, the poles are just simple, the circular poles, circular sections. They're tapered at the top, and they're meant to complement but not imitate the historic context. And they're all black in order to blend into the surroundings. The T-base also eliminates the need for those unsightly rodent barriers. As I pointed, I have some images. The traffic signal heads, all the housing will be black. Currently, some of it's yellow on the back, some of it's all yellow. So it'll all be consistent. Black traffic signal heads, black poles, black bases. We will, as Roberta had asked earlier in the presentation about the height of the pole, one of the poles, new T-base poles that exists on Church Circle currently has the traffic signal mounted on top of it, which makes it higher or taller than any of the other signals. All of the new signals will be mounted or bracketed to the pole, not mounted on top of them. And then the pedestrian signals are down below. And then in terms of the detectable warning pads that are required for ADA, we're going to be utilizing heavy duty materials. We're proposing to use a cast iron pad as opposed to the current, I don't know, they're a flexible mat that it's held down with adhesive. They tend to curl up. They don't last too long. The appearances are unsightly. So the cast iron will be neat and remain in place. And the tactile pads, the truncated, they're called truncated domes, the raised portions, those last longer with the cast iron material. And then finally, the controller that we're proposing is approximately the same size as the existing one. However, there's currently a battery backup on the exterior of the housing. I guess the components have all gotten small enough that the new one, the the battery backup will be housed within the new controller. So I just kind of a comparison here. So this was actually what Roberta was alluding to. We did a walkthrough, and this is an existing pole in front of the Farmers Bank at Weston Church Circle. You can see there's an existing T-base here. This is the type of pole we're proposing for all the new poles that will hold traffic signal heads. In this case, it's mounted on top. However, we will be mounting the signals here so that they sit lower. They're currently mounted bracketed to the existing poles. The poles are probably a little bit shorter only because the base is shorter. This is the other type of existing bases, the breakaway base with the rodent barrier. So we're replacing these, with the new T bases. You can see here we have different types of signal heads. We've got square visors and round visors and yellow casing on the back and black on the front. Everything will be all black, including the pedestrian heads. I didn't call this out, but this is a pedestrian signal and the housing on the back is yellow. For our project, everything will be black. And then this is the existing controller with the battery backup on the exterior. The new controller will be immediately adjacent in the foreground here, and it'd be roughly the same size. And then here is the existing, we have yellow detectable warning pads. These are the type that are glued down, but we will be using the cast iron ones. I also wanted to point out on Main Street at Conduit, we have these T-base poles. So there's a precedent for downtown for these types of poles. And you can see here, they're bracketed to the pole. Now they're on side arms, probably for better visibility up the street. I believe the brackets will bring the pole, the traffic signal heads closer to the poles, but this is the same type of pole as we're proposing for this project. You can see here, and this signal head is banded to the pole, and there's the top of the pole. So it'll be at a lower elevation than we saw up on West Street. Again, here's existing traffic signal heads, but as I showed in the first picture, all the housing will be black and the visors will be circular.
Nice.
This is a example of a control box, and this is just the diagram. So you can see it's approximately 2 feet deep, 4 feet wide, and approximately 55 inches tall.
It's huge. These things are huge.
It's the same size as the one that's out there, I'm pretty sure. So here's the intersection of West and Church Circle. And again, we have the detectable pads, but we're proposing to use cast iron. They do come in a variety of colors. However, per ADA requirements, you have to have high contrast. And so we currently have yellow pads out there. So we're proposing to use federal yellow cast iron pads. And then this was what I was thinking of. So this is the style of push button and sign that will be used in this project. This is at Calvert and Blade, and you can see here the white sign, and then this is the Braille symbol for the pedestrian, and it has an arrow under it pointing in this direction, and then the push button is at the bottom. And so those are the ramps. And I will point out here that there are other options besides the yellow, but these are white brick pavers. And I will say that the truncated domes, the raised portion, which is what's needed by visually impaired people to discern the edge of the travelway, they tend to wear down with the pavers. The cast iron would certainly last longer. Also, the white pavers are very limited in their production. So it could be at the time that you go to construction, they're not available. And so we're proposing to go with the cast iron for durability and the yellow for high contrast. And so the last thing, I just wanted to talk about the schedule. So the design is currently at 30% completion. We anticipate it'll be completed by July of this year. It would then go, we have advertising, bidding, and award, which typically takes 2 to 3 months, and construction for this project is expected to take 1 year. The construction cost, currently at 30%, is estimated at $650,000. However, that doesn't include construction administration costs or inspection costs, which are estimated to be about $150,000. And of course, we would have archaeological monitoring associated with this project, being in the historic district. As I mentioned earlier, that complete streets approach we're trying to follow. BG&E prepared an archaeological assessment of the Circle and South Street where they're working. And so we will be utilizing the recommendations from that assessment to guide the monitoring for this project. That's all I have for now.
All right. Well, thanks. Okay, we'll open it up for discussion with commissioners and maybe more additional questions, and then I'll ask Roberta. We've switched that around again this time, and we're probably going to do that in the future. Roberta asked that she comment after we do, so that is again the second meeting we've done that. So, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I actually have a couple questions that I was kind of holding as we went through the process. One is, in several of the photographs, it appears that some of the traffic poles have additional signage on them, either one way or parking or do not enter or some other signage. And I just want to, I'm hoping that those signs will make the jump to the new poles so that, God forbid, we don't have to put up new poles of any kind for additional signage on the Circle.
Yes. The signs that currently exist would be transferred to the new poles.
Okay.
And certainly we will take a look, and if there's anything that we can eliminate, we will. We're always looking to reduce clutter.
Even better. And then I'm one of those people that when I walk in downtown, I notice where someone did a poor job when they removed something in the brick sidewalks of bringing the sidewalk back to a good appearance. And so I'm hoping that as the brick is dug up to put in the new poles and then the old poles are removed, that there is going to be some care to make sure that when we're done, the site of the old poles is as it should be, as in a good appearance, and hopefully using the brick that was removed from the new pole locations.
Yes, we would we always, when we're working in the historic district, have the contractor salvage all the bricks that they can, and if additional brick is needed, we would certainly, when we come at application, we would have identified what brick would be utilized to replace any broken bricks, and certainly we would match any existing brick patterns that are in the sidewalk as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure, Bill. Did Bill eventually join us? Bill Williams? Doesn't look like that. Okay. Kim, comments from you?
Well,
I'm sorry, Will. I just saw your hand up. Go ahead, Kim. Let's see, Kim. Kim?
Well, no, I just, I actually began my career as a transportation planner for the New York State Department of Transportation, from in District 9. So I know all this, I know this vocabulary, but this is pre-ADA, and it's fascinating to me to see how complicated it has become and what a puzzle it has become. But I think I see a lot of thought being put into this, and I know there's a lot of standards that have to be complied with, and I think they've been taken on thoughtfully. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the effort that's been put into this plan.
Yeah. There's two, just a quick question for you, Kim, and there's two things. There's the traffic signals themselves. What do you think about the treatment of the ramps, the handicap ramps?
With the yellow?
Yeah.
Well, it's a question of whether it's a visibility thing or a blind thing at this, or visual impaired things at this point. I'm really not totally up to date on what the standard is right now, because they've expanded a lot over time. But maybe they can answer, is the yellow just to be consistent with other walkways we've done, or is that the current standard that it has to be highly visible for people with low vision? Because that's a current thing.
So my understanding is the key thing, it's not that it has to be yellow, because as I showed in one of the drawings, one of the images, the cast iron, there's multiple colors. So there's red and gray and black. It depends on what you're placing it in. So if we had white concrete sidewalks, red or black pads would create high
differentiate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to create a contrast. So given that the sidewalks are red brick pavers, we don't really have a lot of options in terms of color in creating contrast. As I said, I did show.
Is this consistent with other ADA treatments we've done? I'm thinking about other areas on West Street going outward or down Main Street. Yellow is what we've been consistently using, because that consistency is also desirable.
Yes. So this is Church, on the screen now is Church Circle at West. So we already have yellow pads there. There's one at Church Circle in Franklin, and I believe my image from Main Street, I thought there was some. Here we have none, because there's been no upgrades. Typically they're put in, if we did something to disturb the area, then we would install them. So there are yellow pads, so that's why we were.
But not everywhere.
Right.
This is Roberta. I'd like to answer that question as well. The yellow pads have been used without HPC approval. We have been part of the discussion on places like Main Street and also on Cornhill, where projects were underway or planned, and we specified that they not be a glaring difference between the existing material, but still contrasting. So yellow is not what the Historic Preservation Commission has approved in other places.
Can I just mention, so you brought up Cornhill Street, and there are cast iron detectable pads there set into red brick, and they were left a natural cast iron color, but there's no contrast at all. They're the same, they're reddish brown, the same as the paver. So you don't get the high contrast that's required per the federal ADA regulations.
Well, it would be a good definition of what is high contrast, because what was used on Cornhill was approved at the time.
Yeah, so did ADA regulations change between now and then?
I think Cornhill just went in recently, didn't it, Roberta?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think ADA has changed. Okay. All right, I think maybe we can have to separate these two components as we talk, as we summarize.
We're noted, and certainly I had anticipated that would be an issue of concern. So we will further research and make sure we're ADA compliant with our recommendations when we come for application.
Okay. Okay, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the due diligence I believe the city has done and all the parties to this thorough presentation. And I think this project is necessary. And unless somebody, Roberta or Tim, you have something that you can bring to my attention I haven't thought of, I think it's entirely feasible as presented.
Okay, thanks. All right, where I was going was to see how far from a due diligence point of view we had gotten. And I think there are possible additions, possible changes. I know there are the pros, but even Lisa mentioned one comment, well, maybe that over there we could switch. So that's where I was going. Well, I understand what you're saying, that they're the pros, they assume they've done their due diligence, but we are adding a net number of, especially the 6 foot standalone items to the historic landscape, and this is held to the highest standard, and therefore we should try as very hard as we can.
Well, Tim, I take your point well, but I think that my questions were to get them to say, which I believe they did, that they're doing what they have to do, given the conditions.
There are a few places I think there are still some options open, and I don't. So I would like them to pursue and present that.
Sure.
It maybe even show what I would like. Any applicant is asked to show what they considered, like show your work in school, right? What options did they consider that would strengthen their proposal much, in my mind?
And I support your request for that info.
Okay. So for instance, that one that I talked about, I'm showing you with my arrow on my screen, but that doesn't help. The one on the left-hand side of the screen we're talking about right here. Would it have been possible to move that light standard or light pole over towards where the top of that ramp and gang that 6-foot guy there and eliminate one? That was one that I thought of. And maybe there's a vault there that prevents that. But so where there are these, maybe the easiest way to me is I think the applicant needs to defend the 6-foot standalone button boxes a bit more, because they're the net new add to the whole environment. They don't exist today.
Hey, Lisa, would you like me to answer that question, or you
Absolutely no.
best responded to in a follow-up?
Well, actually, what I'm really, and we're going along. It's 8:20 now, and we have another very important one. So I guess my point really is from a strengthening your application from a feasibility point of view. What we're looking at here are guidelines that have to do with clutter in the historic landscape. So I think the more that you can show your work, that if you're adding, you're taking one away, for instance. And that's why I was trying to get you to understand on the drawings, to show a table of we're not actually adding clutter, we're consolidating. So where you're consolidating, show your wins and show us where you need to, where you can't do that, why you can't.
Right. Yeah. Maybe there's something I can add that'll help clarify the process, and then that the kind of the show your homework type request that you just made, Tim, maybe that's as a follow-up item. But let me attempt to give you a couple sentences to clarify first.
Well, maybe I think I have to be respectful for the next application. Okay. I think I think you take my point.
I understand your point. There's actually one thing that we probably didn't mention that I think it probably is inhibiting some of your understanding, and that was what I was going to attempt to clarify.
If you can be very brief. Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah, if you notice, there's a lot of traffic signals around the United States. There isn't always a push button, right?
Right.
And so there is a lot of thought, do we need push buttons here? Now, the push button isn't to request the pedestrian walking symbol, because the push buttons are going to operate on what we call recall. In other words, the light is not going to be dependent on who's there. It's going to come up at a certain amount of time every time for a pedestrian, right? And so we have to think, well, what's the purpose of these devices? The purpose of the devices isn't to beg for the walk signal. The purpose of the device is to provide some visual and audible for people that are impaired. Okay. That's the key issue. So if we don't have those, then if we don't have those, then we're saying, well, we really comply with ADA. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think we understand they're necessary. I'm just trying to say, do you need them to be standalone and in every instance? And that's what I'm asking you to look at further.
Yeah, I think we can easily answer that question.
Okay. That being said, I also have a comment that Roberta brought up. Roberta will get a chance to comment in a minute, but I personally feel that we have not been included in, the HPC has not been included with these yellow landing pads, and there are options that are compliant. And I do not believe that the yellow landing pads are feasible under our guidelines. And the guideline specifically is a landscape guideline. I'll look it up for you. C1 has to do with design and materials of landscape, relates to the streetscape in general. That is not compliant right now. I might be the only commissioner that thinks that, but Personally, I think there are options that have actually been presented. The color options. So I think in your final presentation, you need to clarify that your point on that. And again, it's just me right now saying I don't believe those yellow landing pads are feasible. So you'll need to present more evidence in that regard. And I understand the balance between durability and with the metal's durable and the others are not, but that's not within our guidelines to say it has to be durable per se. It just needs to comply with consistency with the landscape. This is an extremely important circle, so we should hold it to the highest standard. So that's my point.
So noted.
Okay. All right, Roberta, if you would like to summarize. I know, again, I apologize that we've gone on, but this is, like I said, two very important applications tonight.
That's all right. I'll try to be very quick. I first heard about this in June of 2020, and I had some questions and concerns at that time. I didn't hear any more until January of 2021, when it was nearing 35% completion, and I was told that the decisions had been made. Thankfully, we've been mitigating since then, and I appreciate Lisa's list of mitigation measures that have been taken. I still have a number of concerns. We already discussed the warning surfaces, the tactile pads, where I don't think yellow is appropriate. I'm concerned not only about the visual aspects, but the integrity and the character defining features of the buildings themselves. What hasn't been mentioned is that at where the handicap ramps are, in order to have the level landing surface and the 12:1 ratio, they are proposing grading below the foundation level of these buildings. And that's a serious concern to me as far as the actual preservation of the buildings and exposing cellar foundations that were never meant to be exposed. I'm also concerned about when the poles are being moved closer to the buildings, how close are they being moved? Do they affect the character defining features of the buildings themselves? Do they affect in a negative manner windows, entrances? You can't tell really from either the plan or the elevations so far. And as Tim has mentioned, I'm also concerned about the number of poles. And yes, we have mitigated being able to reduce them somewhat. And I think there's still a possibility of reducing more. So yes, to address Will's comments, there are regulations. There are also historic preservation regulations that have to be considered, and there are mitigation measures possible. So in my mind, we look forward to addressing my additional concerns as well as those raised by any others.
Okay, I'll do a quick summary here. Regarding the traffic signals on Church Circle, we had a discussion around several design issues, mainly having to do with the light poles themselves and the potential additional clutter that occurs there. I do acknowledge the fact that the city has gone to a great effort to mitigate certain things and actually improve the color differences between yellow and black and the existing, and they're consistently colored black. So that's a very positive aspect in terms of the visual clutter. But there are a net new objects in this very important landscape that we would welcome additional analysis or evidence showing that every option was considered in terms to eliminate some. That had to do particularly with the 6-foot item M's, the push button, 6-foot push button items. The guidelines that are important there are in between the A and the B section of the guidelines having to do with public space. It should be, we are charged to protect the streetscape from insensitive change. So that's one particular guideline. And then the other guideline that's important for you to be considering is C1, which has to do with design and materials of a landscape design. There are several other key guidelines. I won't go into detail, but I think after the fact, Roberta and I can we can make a list of them and then show that to the commissioners also, just to provide you with some additional guidelines. But I think you caught the gist of our discussion. All right, Tammy, did you get all that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to the design team and to Lisa. Did we give you appropriate feedback or adequate feedback?
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you still there? I forgot to mention the one important thing I said, that in regards to the landing pads, at least one commissioner feels that the yellow is not feasible, and additional evidence should be presented for other options that would be more compliant with particularly guideline C1, which is being compatible with the existing landscape. Almost forgot my biggest point, right? Sorry.
I've got it noted.
All right, thank you. And Tammy, if you could add that to the summary, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Will do. Will do.
All right. Thanks very much. Appreciate all your effort. I really do. All right. On to the
easy
parking,
one.
the parking, right. All right. So I am not sure, is Eileen here? Yeah, there she is. Hi, Eileen. You usually take the lead, so I assume it's tonight. You are too.
I was going to, let me ask Ivan, can you put up the slides, Ivan?
That we can.
All right. Well, great. If Eileen, you would just introduce your team. I think we all know most of the team already, but there's some new names on here as well. So perhaps you could just introduce your team here and then tell us what you'd like us to know.
Well, good evening. We are very excited to be joining the HPC this evening.
We're glad to have you.
Yes, we are happy to be here. You will hear this evening from the city manager, David Gerald, from Ivan Doolan, who is the project manager, Bryce Turner, who is the project architect, and I believe is Andrew Lewis also on the call?
Yes, I am.
Andrew Lewis, and did I miss anyone who's going to be joining the conversation?
No, that's going to be it from our side. Yeah.
Great. Well, we look forward to a robust discussion with the commission. And tonight we want to present the proposal, the first conceptual proposals for Hillman Garage, how it will fit in on this site, what will be the compliance with the zoning and the height, and the proposed design and materials. By way of background, next slide, Ivan. The slide after that, thanks. The driving forces behind, one slide back, Ivan. The driving forces behind the city dock plan were one slide back.
Apologies, it's a little bit slow in updating.
Okay, one slide back.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Were really twofold. One was the need to address the urgent need, the flooding at City Dock. As we mentioned when we spoke with you in February, the dock now floods 52 days a year. And what became clear is the city can no longer put this issue on the back burner. It had to be addressed immediately. The second issue that was a driving force for really all of this effort, the next slide, please, was the need to provide easy access The existing garage, as you all know, is dilapidated at best, and there needed to be access to the city's downtown, access that's safe and efficient, a new garage with greater capacity, and the connection between the city dock proposed plan and the garage is that on city dock, in order to build the park, much of the parking will have to be removed. That parking will be captured in the new garage, hence the commitment throughout the City Dock Action Committee plan of no net loss of parking. Next slide, please. In addressing these long-standing issues, the really strong commitment on the part of the city is that it's essential to remove the threat from flooding, finally address the parking if we're going to secure both the health and maintain the character of our residential community, as well as ensure the viability of the businesses downtown. So the future health of the entire downtown community is tied to resolving these issues. Next slide, please. The challenge for the city now is to, first of all and foremost, respect the HPC guidelines while providing the much needed additional parking spaces in the proposed new garage. So with that, our direction in both selecting a team to build Hillman as well as the city dock, and our direction as they move forward has been that they must ensure that the new garage will enhance the surrounding environment. The new garage must reflect and reinforce the community character. There has to be attention to detail, whether it be architectural elements, architectural rhythms, human scale openings, the opportunity for adaptive reuse, and very importantly, activating Gorman Street. Those were the criteria in selecting the firm that you see before you this evening, and that is the criteria as they move forward. I'd like to turn this over now to the city manager, David Gerald.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Eileen. It's good to see everybody this evening again, and we're happy to be back with you. And I just want to very briefly give you an update on what we've been doing and what we have going on with this project. Of course, we're still in the pre-development phase, but the focus, in addition to the design for the garage, which you're going to hear about a lot tonight, we've also been focused, and AMRP has been focused on the feasibility analysis. So that includes confirming all of the parking assumptions, all based on the parking data that we had at the time of the RFP, and then any new parking data that's been collected, and figuring out how to optimize the parking assets that we have citywide. So they're not just looking at the downtown area or the Hillman Garage area. They're looking at the entire city for parking assets. So of course tonight you're going to see the new garage renderings and the new bulk and mass of the garage, and how it complies with the zoning requirements. Next slide, please. So I think you all understand how the new garage is linked via this P3 process with the city dock. We have the same team doing it. Some of the financial resources will support the city dock project in addition to other grants and resilience authority and those types of things, but they're linked closely together. And the Hillman Garage is going to allow us to really improve the economic situation for the whole downtown area. So it's a very, very important project for us. That's why I'm here tonight to watch. You usually don't see me at these meetings, but this is a really important project for us. So we appreciate your interest in this and your feedback on the garage design. So I'll turn it over, I guess, to Ivan or back to Eileen.
Yep. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us time to present today. We are really excited to provide an update and more detail as to what we've done. Recognizing that it's late in the evening already, we were told that we had to start with an exciting image as a preview on things to come. So thought a little bit of color could help too. So what we wanted to do as we walk through. We have a lot of information to get to. We don't want to completely overload you, but what we are hoping to do is kind of walk through some of the steps that kind of where we started from, what the current condition is, how what we're proposing compares to the current condition, and then get into time and energy allowing potentially we've saved some of the more the driest stuff for last, I think, when it comes to floor plans and stuff like that, but we're happy to follow up.
Well, just so you know, it would be considered interior, so the floor plans don't really.
Yeah, no, I know. They have a tendency to link together when it comes to garages more than
a little bit different. I get it.
Yeah. So what we've done, we have started with the design that was produced as part of the proposal, because that was kind of the foundation for the assumptions and the analysis around financial feasibility and the interplay that David Gerald mentioned between the city dock and Hillman Garage. We've undertaken survey, archaeological, geotechnical investigations as we've gone along and updated design. We've looked at how Hillman forms part of the wider parking system. And that's important because the size of the garage is going to be will have to be determined based on the initial parking study that's currently underway, as well as kind of the city's plans when it comes to streetscape and what activities the street should be used for when it comes to conversion into dining, pedestrian access, things of that nature. So this all kind of comes together. So what we started with, just a trip down memory lane, and to start with something that if you start with something bad, then the improvement looks even better. But here is just more so than the design, just setting the stage for some of the assumptions that were made last year, and that is a garage that has about 575 parking spots. That's roughly the amount that we estimated was going to be needed. Garage that goes over 5 levels, footprint that fits within the existing Hillman Garage, keeping vehicular entrance and exits both on Gorman and Duke of Gloucester. And we included a fair amount of adaptive reuse features, so the ability to convert the garage to other uses in the future, as well as the very important reactivation of Gorman Street. So that's kind of the frame of mind and reference that we had kind of going into this. So what we've been doing since the start of the PDA is looking at how we can optimize the design. One of the things that we've done is for optimizing the traffic flow within the garage and making it just a more efficient garage space-wise, is we moved the ramp from, we've had it originally in the middle, we've moved back the ramp to the Duke of Gloucester side. We have focused a lot of the adaptive reuse features related to the Gorman Street activation as a way to reduce the floor-to-floor height. So originally we had more adaptive reuse features that pushes the height of the garage up due to height requirements for other building usage. So we've tried to optimize that height down as much as possible. We've also tried to take advantage of the gateless parking system that we plan on using. And the reason I mention that is that affords us some ability to have easier traffic flow in and out of the garage. You're not punching a ticket and just or waiting to get a ticket or paying as you exit, which causes backup, which can lead to kind of backup out into Main Street. And we've done a lot of work, and Bryce will go into much more detail on updating the facade design to be more in keeping with Annapolis. We've currently the updated design now currently assumes a partial top floor that reduces the number of parking spaces to 550. Just want to be upfront about we're looking at that from the parking study side and kind of what will be needed. So there might be need for more spaces here. So wanted to flag that ahead of time. To start, where we want to start first is just look at kind of where the garage is placed and lot requirements, height, things of that nature. As I mentioned up front, we've undertaken a lot survey investigations as part of the PDA with the city. The existing Hillman sits on a continuous city lot that stretches from Main Street to Conduit to Duke of Gloucester Street. It's the same lot that City Hall is located on. And based on the configuration of that lot and the placement of that lot, the front side is on the Duke of Gloucester side, as reviewed and determined in conversations with the city. So here's what that lot looks like, and we'll hit on several of these types of models to use to illustrate the project as we move forward. Up in the left-hand side, you'll often see kind of existing versus new garage to hopefully help orient as we flick through. But this is the total the lot that the garage is placed on. This is how we envision the new garage being placed on the same lot. Seen from above, and we'll get back to this in greater detail later. One of the things that we've tried to do is in order to activate Gorman Street and make that a more pedestrian friendly the street, is set the garage a little bit back due to the narrower or shorter garage, if you will. And then looking at the height requirements. So with the front side of the lot being on the Duke of Gloucester Street, and looking at that's also the placement of the front setback line, and this is a little bit granular naturally to kind of walk through the analysis and approach. Front setback line is on that same side, near side sidewalk on Duke of Gloucester. The placement of the garage is kind of within historic district special height limit 2. So that's a 2 foot or 28 feet cornice, and then going up at a 45-degree angle to a 38 feet max ridge line. And what we've done to show that we have a couple of models where it kind of shows the overlay of that plane later to help show kind of how the garage is placed and how it fits under. Based on the work that we've done, and this has naturally been a big focus, is to then fit within that Height District 2. The lot also covers a fair amount of Height District 3 on the all the way up to Duke of Gloucester side, as well as on Conduit and Main Street, where the lot abuts Conduit and Main Street, but the building kind of sits predominantly within in District 2. So here's just the map, which I'm sure all of you are much more familiar with than I. So Here, if you can see my cursor, this is the lot in question that I showed earlier that goes from Main Street to Conduit to Duke of Gloucester. Here's City Hall, which you can see is in Height District 3, and here is kind of the existing garage sitting almost entirely, though not quite, within Height District 2. So on that basis, what does that mean, and kind of in real life, so to say, in the realm of 3D. So here's that model of what that Height District line looks like using the city language and code. So here you can see on the Duke of Gloucester side, the cornice where with a 0 setback as the lot is subject to, you have the 28-foot cornice, and then you have the 10-foot up to the top ridge line that extends upward at a 45-degree angle. That sets the max height for the building, and that extends over here when using Zone 2. For reference, you can see we've included the height of some of the buildings adjacent to the garage here on Duke of Gloucester Street. We're at almost 45 at City Hall. There's 43 and 55 on Conduit, respectively. And this is all measured via a laser scan that was undertaken. So we've gone out and scanned with a laser this entire area, which is how the model is produced. Luckily, it's more efficient than sending me out with a tape measure, though I'm sure some of them probably thought about that at some point in time here. So this is the existing garage, and here you can see the new garage with the proposed design. It sits a little bit further back, but fits within the Zone 2 envelope. And you'll see some more images later of kind of the benefit of that slight setback from the Gorman side street, which really helps with the visual impact when you're walking down Gorman. Here, as I mentioned earlier, on the front of Duke of Gloucester, as well as here on Conduit and Main Street, the lot is actually under Height District 3, and just for reference, we wanted to overlay and show what that would look like. Naturally, if we're fitting within under District 2, stands to reason that we fit within District 3, but thought it would be important to show for reference. And here again with a new garage. So that was kind of a very, very quick speed through of kind of location, zoning requirements, and which is all fine and good. And but how does this actually look like from a mass perspective? So first, I'm gonna go through quite rapidly now the mass in comparison, because we have the same, just also showing the facade, which is probably even a better like-for-like comparison. But for the purposes of comparing kind of the scan of the existing garage and surrounding properties and the proposed new garage, this provides a good comparison. So starting here with the existing garage, you can see looking in Gorman Street from Main Street, the current height at the front up to the top, which is about 36 feet. For the new garage, the front side, we're about 35. You can see this. We've moved the stair tower, and we'll get back to this a little bit later, further into the building to lower the visual impact of that when you're in the front. Depending upon needs and requirements, there is an ability to move that further forward, but for the visual impact, it helps kind of resetting that feature a little bit. Here again, looking in Gorman Street from Conduit, you see here the existing building at the top of the stair tower, which is right on the corner, is at 41.8. With the new garage, again, we've set the tower further back. Top of this floor deck is around 35. Going around, this is the ramp on Duke of Gloucester side street next to City Hall. Here is the new garage, which you can see on the back here has the ramp on this side sloping up towards the to the top deck. Here, a little bit closer image, more kind of pedestrian level as you're walking down Gorman Street. You can see the mass of the existing building. Here's the new garage, and kind of flipping between these two, you can see a little bit of the benefit of setting the new garage further back. It will help being able to provide some vegetation and things of that nature in this area. Same again from the other side with the front. Your eye really gets drawn, at least from massing standpoint, to the ramps. Here with the new design, we'll have a different design feature, which Bryce will talk more about and kind of make it more in keeping with the city aesthetics. And here, just a quick overview shot of the kind of mass of the existing garage in comparison to the buildings surrounding it. Ramps in the front again, stair towers in the front. Here we have the new garage. We've set back the stair towers, ramp located on the lot side front, but less visual impact because it's set in further in the property from the street. And from the other side, looking down the ramp at Duke of Gloucester, you see the existing mass with the new garage with the ramp coming up. Due to the ramp and ramp elevations, you'll see this. There's a little on ramp going up from the existing kind of ramp going down. There'll have to be a slight upward angled ramp so that we're able to meet the ramp sloping up and on the side of the building. So with that, I'm sure sick of hearing me drone on a little bit about and looking at white boxes. That's not the most exciting thing in the world. So I'll hand it over to Bryce as we walk through a little bit more of the detailed design and really get a feel for the visual impact of the new garage. So Bryce.
Great, thanks, Ivan. Good evening, all. Good to see you again. As Eileen and David both said, and Ivan too, I think, our team has really been challenged to increase the number of cars currently at Hillman with a structure that meets historic district height restrictions and design guidelines, that is cost effective and has a pedestrian scaled architectural treatment that blends well with the Annapolis fabric. So that's not easy, right? But I think it's quite a balancing act, but one that I feel that is starting to work out very nicely at this point. So we're pleased to share with you some of these images. I do want to thank Mike Albers, Ryan Hochfeld, and Chris Holler, who have worked very hard on this with me and patiently as well to develop the plan and this design. So just a couple things at the top here. You know, parking structures are inherently warehouses for cars. I mean, with the rather tight envelope that we're allowed in Zone 2, we're left with a volumetric box in terms of massing. And as you saw in the model views that Ivan shared, you know, it is somewhat boxy. So we've created we do have cleaner lines than the current Hillman garage, which gives us some flexibility in creating an architectural facade. But, you know, I'm a firm believer that urban streetscapes and building walls are much more interesting and engaging when they have variety and are permeable and allow pedestrians to experience the interior spaces without having to open a door. You know, like, you know, think about window shopping on Main Street. You know, you don't have to commit yourself to going inside. And I think to the extent that we can create a lot of that openness and the ability to see inside, people feel safer, that it makes it more attractive. And, you know, we also have the requirement here to keep this garage, you know, call it 50% open, as you can see, to avoid sprinklers and mechanical exhaust and things like that. So, you know, we're trying to take advantage of that. And so I think you'll see in some of these images how that is the case. And so after receiving a lot of input from many of you, you know, at various times, we went back to the drawing board after the design that Ivan shared and worked harder to create more brick facade type elements, but also make sure that our openings are dimensioned more proportionately and related better to human scale. And so I hope you'll agree with that. In between and I just want to leave it on this image for a minute, but in between those brick facade pieces that you'll see, you'll also see this very warm but open screen that we're proposing to help break up the brick facade. We didn't want to just have a brick box building here. So we think that this screen piece that's very warm and beige in color, very welcoming, is helpful to break up the various components. So you get some of that diversity of facade design like you have on Main Street. Next slide, please, Ivan. So, you know, here, you know, like I said, we've tried to draw some inspiration from Main Street, and we've realized that Hillman is really a backdrop building for Main Street, certainly along Gorman Street here, or Hutton Drive extended, I like to call this, where you see it at the end of the street, obviously, and you see all that diversity on Main Street. You know, we're working with a palette that I think should be very warm. It's obviously brick, but it's got some metal. And now, next slide, please, Ivan. So you start to see that even at the end of Hutton or Gorman here, that you start to see a brick facade there, and that's about all you see. It looks like it could be just another one of the Main Street buildings, we hope. And I think it starts to blend in very well, especially when these white boxes in the front are rendered their proper colors. Next slide. You know, and of course, looking down Gorman from the other side, you know, you've got this great tree, you've got Masonic Lodge, 164 Conduit Street. And so you see it less probably, but when you go to the next slide, Ivan, you'll see how we push the building back a little bit. But again, you really experience the brick. You always view this building obliquely. You very rarely see it head on. Elevation drawings are really not very meaningful here. You get some peaks through the narrow streets, and then you see it obliquely, as you are here from Conduit Street. Next slide, please. And at the Duke of Gloucester entrance to Hillman, you know, you notice the significant difference between the before and after. Next slide. So we really do have, I think, some presence to the building here, which is important. It identifies the entrance with the brick, obviously signage that will echo that, but then you get the screen that I think feels much lighter on either side and gives it some of that diversity that we're looking for. Next slide, please. So this view is a little closer on Gorman Street from the one I showed a minute ago, and I think this existing stair tower is what so many people think of the existing Hillman garage as. And so I think this becomes really easy to improve. Next slide, please. So you start to see how we've been able to clean that up, get a nice brick corner, and that turns the corner nicely. You'll also see that within some of the openings, we're using metal frames. And we're thinking about a mesh within those metal frames that I think gives it even more of a feeling of a building. And it gives just a little shading of gray to the window openings that feels a lot more like the character that we're really going after. Next slide. Now looking back towards the kind of northwest along Gorman, before and after. So I think this is an important one to be to look at, looking back towards Conduit Street. So you see the entrance to the garage, and then you see an opening. And in those openings, we thought, rather than kind of fill up the entire ground level, we thought it would be better perhaps to open it up, use some bollards, and allow people to actually walk back and forth from the sidewalk to the slab of the parking garage. And because it is sloped at a very similar grade, we think that will work out very well, actually, to make it more permeable again. You also see in the facade type brick elements adjacent to that open bollard space, where we have a larger metal frame in the ground level of that brick facade. Those are movable, that we can pull up and open up for activation of Gorman Street, as you'll see in a few minutes. Next slide. So these, I think you skipped one, Ivan, possibly, if you can just go back.
Do you see the view from Duke of Gloucester?
Yeah, I thought there was an aerial here, but
yeah.
Okay. Anyway, this from Duke of Gloucester, the ramp condition that Ivan mentioned in order to get up a little bit higher to that, the floor elevation, which is kind of like the second floor of the garage from this side. And the brick, you see the stair tower on the left. And in the distance on the right, you see the elevator tower and stair tower that are coupled. And those tend to be in the center bay of or near the center of the center bay, because that is the half level, or the third level really, that goes all the way up to the top. Next. Here we go. Yeah, so this is the view. And I think this is where, to me, it starts to really feel nice in terms of proportions and the materials. Looking again, kind of down Gorman Street, but closer to Main Street with this aerial, you get the sense of that middle bay, how that height is really only on the middle bay. We really have the opportunity, if we needed to get more cars here, we could extend it out further, but we kind of like the scale of the building at that edge, and where we're getting down to like 35 feet here, as opposed to the slightly higher existing building of Hillman. Next slide. Looking again kind of towards the southwest from Gorman, and you get a good sense of the stair elevator enclosure piece. We will need some lighting on the top of this building, of course, and we'll want to keep those relatively low. We think we can probably get the lighting just in that center bay again, but get some lighting for security for the top level. Next slide. And I think this is the last 3D image that we've rendered that I have in this deck. And this is really showing Gorman Street on say an art market day. This is when we want to activate Gorman Street and the character that can be created, such as a Saturday art market for pop-ups, where we can open the metal frame doors, hang signs on them, to transform the ground floor to storefronts, if you will, almost like a retail character. And this is where the sidewalk and that additional room created by moving the building back 4 feet really comes into play. You can see where it says Park Life there in Hill Studios, I believe. Now there may be bollards still there but people will just walk around those too. access the ground floor. And so I think this is one of the great finds that we've had, is that by keeping that floor, which is sloped, of the garage similar to the sidewalk, we can really create a much more accessible experience. So I'm excited about that. The materials we'll talk about now. You can see the brick that we're proposing, and you can actually skip to the next slide. I think the material board is next, Ivan, or is it?
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I mean, we're looking at some brick samples here. Maybe we use 2 bricks, probably will be enough, but to pick up something that's complementary to Main Street, obviously, and we're early days in terms of exploring some of those. We will have some exposed concrete structure, primarily on the inside of the building. Some of it will be peeking out. But this is the material in the middle called longboard, which, I've seen a garage in Tampa recently built that I really like, and it uses a material very similar to this. It looks like wood. It doesn't have to be a wood grain. I think we want to study that. I'd love to get your opinion on that too. But it's a durable material, and I think it has a warm feel to it, and it's just not what you always expect in a parking structure. The metal mesh you see on the right is one of the options we're looking at for the window openings. If we make the budget, I think it'd be great. It gives you a little bit of character, a little bit of a shimmer in those openings. I think it's really helpful. And so, I think we'd get some, black, dark painted metal around some of those openings, and then this metal mesh. So next slide, and we'll go into the plans. One more. So we've got 4 or 5 of our floor plans here. This is the ground level that is very technical in nature, of course, and we have not yet developed in this plan the design of the landscaping or the sidewalks extensively at all. Now all that's going to change. We're working on that now. You see some of the existing sidewalk that's in place, and much of which will tie back into of course. But this is a basic 3-bay garage with angled parking, and we've been able to reduce as Ivan said, the width of the garage in that short dimension, which has been helpful, and that's how we picked up some space along Gorman Street. The stair on the left, which is near the middle bay of the garage, that allows that access up to the top, and then the elevators and stairs on the right as well. And, I think we've got a very functional garage. We're very fortunate to have Walker Parking working with us, and Mike Albers on this. And any more technical questions about the layout that we may want to address, he is here to help with that. But we can skip through, I think, these next couple plans as we go up in the building with these various levels. And that top level, which was the last one you saw there, that is the 1 bay of parking, which is a dead end, of course, when you get up to the top, and you can turn around and come back if all the spaces are full. But we will have signage indicating that type of thing as well. Next slide. So this is the elevation drawing facing Gorman and facing which is basically the north elevation, somewhat northeast, I guess. And you never see the building like this, and I think it's really important to note that, but it's important to understand it in elevation, of course. But the oblique angles, the oblique viewing of this is just much more important in my mind. But you do see how that higher bay of parking is beyond, and although it's ghosted in here in terms of the elevation, you generally will not see that from most views, and I think that's a real win-win. Next slide, Ivan.
I was just going to say before we jump off of this, you can also see, as Bryce mentioned, how the garage follows the terrain, and that helps with kind of the mass of the building as well as enable that in and out. It's difficult to see from the other angles, but here you can kind of see how it slopes down with the terrain.
It's a great point, and it really does keep the elevation, keep the height of the building perception at least lower.
Yep.
And then along Duke of Gloucester, this is very interesting elevation, you gotta admit, but you start to see the topography that we're dealing with. But you also see what you're also seeing in this sectional elevation is the well, if you will, that we're creating around the base of the building in some locations. It's not all completely worked out yet, but in order to keep the openness of the garage that we need and not to have a lot of subterranean walls, there will be some like window wells around a portion of the garage on this side of the building. Next slide. And then the end elevation, if you will, with the elevator tower and stair, looking to the kind of southwest, and then from the Conduit Street side of the building. So those are the elevations and plans, and that is where we are with the design now. We have not been in a position yet to create kind of the finally rendered drawings yet, but you see the progress that we've made. We look forward to getting your feedback and your comments and developing this design further. But
Bryce, if I could ask Ivan, if when you are done, to bring it back to one of the slides of the facades, probably Gorman Street, where so that way the commission has something to view when they make their comments.
Absolutely. I think we can even save you this slide and say that we have done archaeological and geotechnical investigation and are incorporating it. But so nothing major to report, I guess, is the short form, and then we can skip back and recognizing how late it is and start taking questions.
Okay. So thank you for your presentation. It's really moved along, and again, I think it's very exciting. I think the elephant in the room is the height, and so we might as well talk a little bit about that at first. And so I just want to ask some leading questions, and I'll ask the other commissioners to comment as well. I actually want to go pretty far back into those white boxes to introduce the topic, if we could. And get some clarification on height districts. And I do understand the choice of Duke of Gloucester as the baseline. What I'm puzzled about, and you can clarify it for me, is that you're including this in the same parcel as City Hall. So if you go all the way back, keep on going back to where those planes kind of cover, the flat planes that
or site boundaries.
There we go. These two drawings. I just want to ask some clarifying questions.
This one.
Yeah, the site boundaries. Now, to my understanding, obviously you understand that there are two height districts we're talking about here. City Hall is in one, and this parcel is in another. If I look at the map very closely, there's two numbers, 160 and one. Well, let me get back to it real quickly. The height districts are based on.
Yeah,
it looks like this number 150 and number 160. 150 being the parking garage, and 160 being the the City Hall. You're saying it's part of the same parcel, but there are actually, first of all, two different height districts and two 150 and 160. If you look closer, there's something called P1098.
Yep.
And so can you tell us what research has told you about what is the difference between P198 and 150 and 160?
Yeah, and we can provide further kind of more detail around the survey. The short version is 150, 160 building, P 1098 lot, unless I'm corrected by anybody else on the call. So the lot here, and this is probably the best overview.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Probably the best overview, yeah, is spans this entire area. It just so happens that there are two buildings sitting on the same continuous lot.
But that's the 1098 lot.
Correct.
Okay, then so whenever they drew the height districts, they made a distinction between 150 and 160. So what are the 150 and 160 numbers there?
Again, I believe that's a reference to the actual structures on the lot, not the lot number itself. So you can see that consistently throughout elsewhere in this map. Here, for example, you have the same with the school, where you have one number one P number and one numerical number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get back. We can come back to you and confirm that is the case.
Okay, it's just a clarifying question,
Yep.
really. I don't think it matters in the end.
Yeah, that's just from our GIS layer. It's
Yeah.
the structure address and the parcel number together.
So
Yes.
the address is the number 150 and 160.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Well, when they drew the height maps, they put one address in height district 2. So then if we move forward then to your planar things, right now, it appears that your design stays within zone 2. Am I correct?
That's correct.
That's positive, because then we don't have an issue.
Yeah.
And then you did go on to show the next thing possibly, but right now your design with the top deck stays within zone 2. Or actually, what it actually doesn't quite show. You show the current garage is also at the, so I'm a little puzzled, a little bit later. The height of the towers is 52 feet. So
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, there's a difference between height versus height against the topography where you're taking the measurement, and building height as measured by the zoning requirements, which is from the front setback line.
So that would be really helpful to show that I understand exactly what you're saying. So you need to almost draw the floor across from Duke of Gloucester Street and show that that is still
Yes.
below 38 feet.
Yes, correct, and that's what we're trying to show here. We can provide the view from the other side as well, so you can see that envelope.
So Tim, if it exceeded height district 2, instead of it being red, you would see it being white.
White.
So
I know. I get the punch. It would punch through.
or gray, like you can see the roof of City Hall.
I get it. Yep, I see that, and that's really
So-
clear. This is a great drawing.
They're showing it's all under that.
Yeah, it might be helpful to show it a little bit more from a side view, so that people can see it goes straight across as well for
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I guess what I'm saying is that the plane that Duke of Gloucester Street in is the where the measurement is taking from all the way across to Gorman Street, correct?
Correct.
And so that plane, even though the building height might be higher than 38,
Correct.
if you were to draw that plane across your drawing, so that drawing, if you drew a plane across from Duke of Gloucester Street, it would be higher on the Gorman Street side, correct?
Correct.
And you're saying, and if you measured the height of the new tower, so this is the current one. So if you go to your proposed, you're going to see that height, even though that tower height was 52 from the ground, it is not 52 feet from the
front setback line where you're taking the building higher measure.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's I'm just walking that through mentally, but visually that would clarify
Absolutely.
it. Okay. It also fits within the existing garage height, which I think is important to note.
Tim, I think you just pointed out two things that are going to be, when people see the garage being built, the two questions they're going to ask are is it bigger than the old one, and does it fit within the height requirement? And as long as we can answer those with certainty, or everybody can answer those things with certainty, I think that's going to go a long way.
Yes. And staying within height zone 2, and if the design changes in the future, staying within zone 2 is going to be extremely important, because we cannot, even though it straddles to the parcel straddles to, my belief is we need to stay with zone 2 unless you find someone else who in Office of Law or in the Planning and Zoning who disagrees. So I just want to make that clear. Do you understand that, Ivan?
Yeah,
I guess
no,
you're driving the zoning side of this, aren't you, Ivan?
Yeah, I've read a fair amount on zoning regulations in Annapolis over the last couple of months. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And this is just another twist where one parcel's in 2 different zones.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just want to make that clear that it appears to be in compliance with zone 2 at this point.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was I wanted to get that on the table first. Now I'll open it up to comments, questions from other commissioners. Somebody needs to go first besides me.
You can count on me, Tim.
I know I can, Will. You go for it.
I have 2 questions about the elevations. One, while I think you've done a nice job of differing materials and creating what I think are faux windows that you want to put that wire mesh over. Am I reading that correctly, Bryce?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. I mean, they're real windows, just no glass, I guess.
Right. They have that wire mesh. And
right.
So you're thinking of a matte black paint at this time?
Yes, something in that, black, very dark, and whether it's a semi-gloss or matte, we really haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, that's the point that I wanted to just mention. I would not want to see that become such a reflective paint material that it would give the kind of reflections that glass could give. I'd rather see it softer. And the other thing is, this view is excellent for the other point that I wanted to raise, really 2. Is there some way, without changing the structure and the associated costs, that you might break up those large flat planes just a little bit more, either horizontally or vertically, with some appropriate rhythm, so it's not such an extensive flat surface? That's one thought. And the other is,
I'll just chime in real quickly. One of the things we try and provide to applicants is, what guideline are you talking about, Will? And I'll tell you, it's B5. We've got a wonderful guideline about breaking up masses. It's B5. So
thank you. And the other thing is, you gave an example on another slide. Please don't move from this one, of the simulated wood material, I guess. Where would that material appear on this rendering, if it would?
Yeah, it would be right there between the brick facade elements.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
and I might as well jump right to it. What is that material?
It's metal.
Okay.
It's metal with a type of polymer finish of some kind. Yeah.
It is metal, though. It's not synthetic or faux. D28, our guideline says there cannot be any kind of fiberglass or vinyl type product.
Right.
Okay. Metal.
We see
metal.
it as painted metal for all practical purposes, and whether it's wood grain or a paint or a solid color. Yeah. We're with you on the in and out of the building. As much as we can do, we're obviously balancing cost a little bit, but that is the desire, that it be, an 8-inch to 12-inch change in the plane of those portions of the facade.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see, a little bit more of that.
I mean, do you have, and what do you think is a good, is 8 or 12 inches?
I'm not going to go to that granular level, but I would say, when you look, you have a lot of, you've done a lot of study of the adjoining neighborhood, and you see the way that the buildings, because they come at different time periods, their construction and design. They have more variety in terms of variation of surface down the streetscape than this projection elevation does. And so I would like to see that reflected in this design a little bit. But I am, as a taxpayer and commissioner, conscious of the kind of costs that that could add. So I'm mindful of that. And if you find that cost is restrictive, I would want to know that and see what you could do.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, thanks. Bobby, did you have any other questions? We already talked about height there. Other thoughts or questions?
As far as the surface of the building, I would kind of echo what Will is saying. I mean, I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer, but I would love to see some kind of additional interest in the brick facades, you know, whether it's lentils or banding of some kind of, you know, stone or concrete or something, or a different treatment of the brick, just something to give it a little bit of interest. I mean, no one is ever going to mistake this building for a historic building. It's not like we have to worry about, you know, a false sense of history, but if we could somehow just look out and find some elements that you might find on Main Street and attempt to tie it in just a little bit, I think it would really please the eye and break up that big expanse of brick.
Okay. Yeah.
While we're talking
good
about
comment.
that,
I probably should have pointed out there are, and you may have noticed, some of the soldier courses that are below some of the openings. Then, so we're doing a few things.
I can't.
And we've also considered changing brick color a bit as well between a couple of these pieces. So.
Bryce, while we're talking about this, I do want to say that this is such a dramatic improvement over the sort of almost penitentiary-like design of the
You're not
current
supposed
building.
you're not supposed to be judgmental.
But other than that, it was fine, right?
Yeah, but it's so cold, and it's like an ugly attempt at brutalism or something. So you're headed in the right direction.
All right, we just hit a wall at 9:30.
Thank you. Yeah, we're also pleased. Thanks.
Okay, Kim, can you please give us your input?
Well, it's certainly a challenging design problem to be refitting a building into this very unique shaped space with all these topographic issues and things like that. I also feel that we might need some more activation along this street. It still looks a little plain to me, and I need to have some sense about what we think is happening on the other side of the street. That just seems to be a void at this point. And well, it's not a void, but
back doors.
that that I think activating the street is going to involve two-sidedness as well, on both sides. But I think some more classical features like a cornice or of some sort or something might bring it, might assist as well.
Okay. I think when we start now, one of the things I'm really thinking about now is how we accessorize the building, if you will, but lighting, and I think some building mounted lighting will help this facade, and is going to be needed to illuminate the sidewalk. We have signage at various levels that are, that can be very nicely done. We can start to show the other side of the street, and I think you see how it balances better when you start really looking at the brick across Gorman Street. So those are the things that we'll look at, and we will consider any other detailing that may help. And some of that could be some things such as a cast stone header or some things like that that I think you might like. And so we'll study some of those as well.
Okay. We've already addressed the major height and bulk issue, which had to do with, again, it's guideline B3, which has to do with building height staying within the height district that you're in. And the bulk question is something that we can address a little bit. You're using the bulk that you need to use, I believe.
Correct.
You can't get around, I believe, from a design point of view, that there's an interesting difference between the current garage, which no one is thrilled with, but its top level is what they've done to reduce the bulk. I'm not sure it was intentional, but it is open. It's an open metal grid design. And that actually ends up lightening the bulk a little bit. Instead of going all the way up with a brick, I'm kind of going a little bit in a different direction than the other commissioners here. That's something, instead of adding a cornice necessarily, something heavy, something more transparent at that top level. Again, I don't want to be a design. I'm just saying the bulk of this building is bigger because you've had a solid line. And in reducing bulk is always of interest. It isn't just the height, but it's the actual bulk. So I would experiment a little bit with that, but it is effectively in compliance with B3. I was interested in, so there's a regulation, it needs to have 50% open sides in order to qualify or to enable exhaust and other aspects, and that's what your guidance is. So this is 50% open to air.
Yeah, it's approximately that. It's a rather convoluted formula they use, but
okay,
practical purposes, yeah, it's about 50%.
Okay. The mesh option, to me is something optional. Personally, it is not a retail establishment or an apartment building. So to me, the mesh is, if there's one design option that it doesn't seem to add or detract from a design guideline point of view. It's truly optional from a guideline point of view. You may prefer it from a design point of view. There's one design feature which I think needs a little more work and that's on the Duke of Gloucester Street side. The ramp coming in, it's going to go up, and then so there's going to be tunnels coming down that aren't really very clear. Yeah, right here, you see where those pedestrians are?
Yep.
Right there. I think you might want to show us a little bit more what's happening there. From a height and retaining wall, you got a bunch of retaining walls that I'm not even sure they really exist, but so a little more detail there would help us, I think, understand what that's going to look like and how the materials are treated there. That's a very commonly used pedestrian space back and forth. So I thought that one area.
Yeah, and just want to emphasize, we will with the size of the garage, we will be keeping kind of the pedestrian access around on both sides of the garage. It might be that we need to do something with the walkway, but there will be access. That's very important because it's part of the circulation pattern of the city. Yeah, and it's a good thing you'll never see this facade, right? I'm really excited to see that you're going to be using brick and not brick that is consistent and wire cut, not wire cut, but that you're not going to be using a panelized construction, which would run in, I think, to some of our guideline problems in terms of use of materials. There's this state parking lot out on Rowell Boulevard used paneled prefabricated off-site and planted on a brick or on a concrete slab building, and it was an example of how we don't want to do that. So I hope that doesn't enter into the design. Am I understanding correctly that this will be?
That's our desire as well, and so for the moment, that's what we're showing.
Okay, for the moment.
Well,
hold on to it.
Okay, I'm going to.
Good.
I'll fight.
I think the opening of the Gorman Street side and the bollards would be very consistent with many of our guidelines in terms of pedestrian flow and activates that space very successfully. So I'll give Roberta a chance, but there are many guidelines that are going to be in play here. That we are considering this a new building, obviously. so the visual relationship between old and new and B1 and B2 are important. We talked about B3, which is building height and bulk, which is the big one. Relationship of facade to the whole is B4. That's what we're talking about, the blocks, and I do agree with the other commissioners. It's up to you to decide how you create a shadow line there. What's big enough to create a shadow line? I think that's important. That's actually B5. There are going to be a lot of more details needed in your eventual design having to do with retaining walls, lighting, any kind of landscaping. And you mentioned that that'll be coming. And in fact, we would welcome another pre-app if you want to talk more detail about that. Sidewalk paving materials, any kind of street furniture that you're going to be putting in on the exterior. We talked a little bit about the Secretary of the Interior. Well, the false sense of history, no one's going to mistake this for a new building, but there are some examples of in other cities where they've tried to make a new parking garage look like almost sometimes very strange things, and you're not there yet, so don't add too much to make it look old. Demolition is one of our guidelines, and I think we're all in agreement we'd have no problem with demolishing the existing building. And those are just some examples. And exterior lighting, we'll need some details on that. And archaeology, you understand already, is going to be reviewed. You've already met the requirement to do that, and you've started that. So that's just a run through of the guidelines that we're going to be citing in terms of feasibility. Okay, Roberta, your comments, please. Roberta, you might still be on mute if you haven't.
All right, now I'm fully in. Sorry. I really appreciate how this is evolving and the ability to take my issues into account in the meetings that we've participated in together. I think, this is a work in progress, and I agree with Tim that we don't want to add too much to it, but on the other hand, a bit more in the way of shadow lines is a good idea, but Bryce has a good point that some of that can be created with lighting and signage. I counted 26 guidelines at this point. So if a list would help you, then I'd be glad to provide that. But we've covered a lot of those in the discussion tonight. And it's true that things like lighting and sidewalks and landscape, all still need to be covered. And I know you're still working on how to do sidewalks and how to connect the people from the garage to the sidewalks and so on. So I do look at this as an evolving plan. Just this afternoon, was the first time I had seen the longboard screen, and I hadn't had time we didn't have the opportunity to make comments about that. And as long as it's, as long as it is metal and not a synthetic, then that's a good thing. So we just look forward to the next stage. I think you've done an awful lot for something so major for your first pre-application. I mean, this is a lot of moving parts, and you've put it all together with really a lot of thought this far. And others may talk about the circulation, the location of stair towers, and so on. But as far as the appearance and the historic preservation guidelines, it works for us. Whether it works for others who are considering the interior, that's a different discussion. So that's good for me right now. I don't know if John Tower is still here or our assistant chief. If John, you wanted to say anything?
Don't.
If he's either not here or on mute.
I don't see him.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe the Councilwoman Tierney
I was just
had a
about to say,
comment.
I was going to say, we have a few guests if they would like to make comments.
Oh,
Hi, Ellen.
thank you, Eileen. I think John deserves a break after his bone analysis yesterday.
Yeah.
I think I have to just say this personally. I mean, I know some of you know I've been in construction and you know I've been in those rooms in pre-construction meetings, and we look at these challenges as, you know, struggles and you know, difficulties and all that. And what I observed tonight, and I have no doubt, is that you didn't approach it that way at all. You looked at them, you know, yes, as challenges, but you fully embraced them. And I see that in these concepts. I mean, you had me not at hello, but you had me at meeting that B3 guideline, as Bobby said, is the big thing. And I know that it will continue. What with how many, Roberta? 20
26
something
and counting.
yeah. Yeah,
I've got a
but
spreadsheet now.
You should, and the technology. I mean, the massing analysis with the envelope is just. I mean, I'm just giddy. So
Yeah.
thank you. You all should be congratulated, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Thank you.
Okay. We did not receive any other public comment before the meeting, so you know. Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to try to remember whether I actually gave you my spiel at the beginning of this. Tammy, did I? I might not have. I just
You
wanted,
didn't, and I missed it. I'm sorry.
and you didn't. Okay, so I just wanted, in summary, I just wanted to remind you that any comments that we've made tonight are in no way interpreted to be an approval of the project, and absence of comment on any aspect of the presentation does not indicate acceptance. This pre-application is solely an accommodation to the applicant. So Eileen, if you could just acknowledge that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, we certainly understand that, and we're just thrilled to be able to get your initial perceptions, and
Great.
we will be bringing much more detail back to you.
Super. All right, well, I'll summarize then regarding the Hillman Garage pre-application. I think I would be fair to say the judgment so far of all of the commissioners is that the project is feasible, primarily because it complies with guideline B3 building height in the zone 2 area, meaning that the maximum height can be 38 feet. If future designs do exceed that, it would become problematic from a feasibility point of view. The design presented is also compliant with some of the visual relationships between old and new in terms of use of materials, B1 and B2. There was some concern on parts of among the commissioners about the scale and the massing of the building, guideline B5, which some design changes could improve that, but that's back to the judgment of the designers to do that. There are future details needed having to do with landscape, retaining walls, and a few of the other guidelines having to do with landscape. The current design doesn't project a false sense of historical design. That's part of D1, the Secretary of Standards guideline. Guideline D2 has to do with demolition, which will be a part of this application. There are no issues there. In terms of exterior colors, D8, the choice of the color of the brick and the design of the brick is important. Also, that is D14, new masonry. The texture should be compatible with the bricks and extruded bricks that are found in the vicinity. And in terms of any exterior doors, we haven't gotten into that yet. That's guideline D19. We discussed guideline D28, which is the use of contemporary materials, meaning synthetic materials. That does not appear to be an issue in the current design. And the applicant is already working on the archaeology aspects, which are the guidelines E1 and E2. So Tammy, is that summary good?
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Thank you.
Commissioners, have I summarized our discussion? Nod. If I haven't, yell at me. Okay. All right. Eileen and team, have we provided you with adequate feedback?
Yes, it's been terrific. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. It's very exciting. Can't wait to see the rest. So you're free to come back for other pre-applications. If you prefer, you could actually even come back for a pre-application on certain sections of it if you felt like you wanted to show us landscape as it emerged, but we'll certainly make time for you in pre-applications, or we look forward to a full application.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Good night. Oh, sorry.
Good night.
That doesn't
Bye.
quite the adjournment. The rest of you have to stay. All right.
Move adjournment.
Okay. Any other administrative business tonight? No? Okay, good. We do have a meeting coming up in the 1st, and the agenda will be out soon. And so I will, who would like to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?